This is the gripping tale of Ethan Ward, a fearless cowboy trapped in a deadly lie, and Naelli, the stunning Apache-raised woman fighting for her freedom. Their worlds collide in betrayal, danger, and unexpected love as they stand against a ruthless cattle baron. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And tell me, where are you watching from? Let's get started. Ethan Ward had never been the sort of man who bowed easily, but even he couldn't ignore the pressure boss Calder put on him that afternoon. The cattle baron sat behind his heavy oak desk, smoke curling from his cigar, eyes sharp as barbed wire. He spoke in a tone that left little room for refusal. His daughter needed a husband, and Ethan was the perfect candidate. The words were slick, laced with false generosity. Ethan felt something off, something unclean, but Calder pushed harder, painting his daughter as a burden no man wanted. "Ugly as sin," Calder said with a dismissive flick of his wrist, "and cursed with bad blood. But you, son, you're sturdy. You can handle her." Ethan didn't care about looks. He'd lived alone on the range long enough to know companionship meant more than a face. Besides, Calder was offering land, cattle, supplies, everything a cowboy could use to finally build something his father would have been proud of. Maybe it wasn't love, but it could be a life. And yet something in the cattle baron's smile felt wrong, like a rattler hiding under dry brush. The wedding was rushed. Too rushed. Only a handful of Calder's men stood around the small barn Calder had converted into a chapel. There were no flowers, no music, no warmth, just the smell of dust and old wood. Ethan arrived wearing his best shirt, freshly scrubbed boots, and a quiet uncertainty twisting inside him. Calder greeted him with a broad, forced grin and a hearty clap on the back that nearly knocked the breath from him. "She's ready," Calder announced. The bride stood still as stone, veiled in thick lace from head to toe. Her hands, small, delicate, were the only part visible. They trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it by locking her fingers together. Ethan stepped closer, offering a polite nod, though he couldn't even see her face. She didn't respond, didn't speak, didn't lift her head. Something about her silence lodged in his chest. The preacher began speaking, though the words felt hollow. Calder hovered behind Ethan like a shadow, impatient, restless, acting more like a man making a business deal than a father witnessing his daughter's marriage. Ethan felt the hair on his arms rise. Why such urgency? Why such secrecy? Why such a heavy veil? When the final vows were spoken, the preacher hesitated. "You may lift the veil," he said. Ethan reached forward, expecting anything, scarring, deformity, perhaps sorrow etched deep. He prepared himself to look past whatever he saw, because a promise was a promise. But when he lifted the lace, every thought in his head scattered like startled horses. She was beautiful. Not delicate, fragile beauty, no. Hers was the kind born of wind and land, of grit and spirit. High cheekbones that hinted at Apache blood, fierce dark eyes that watched the world with sharp awareness, lips set in a determined line. She wasn't just attractive, she was arresting, a wild, stunning contradiction to every lie Calder had told. Ethan's breath hitched. "You're not what he said." She didn't smile, didn't soften. Instead, she leaned closer, voice low enough only he could hear. "Don't trust him." The words sliced through the silence like a knife. Ethan blinked, caught between confusion and a rising instinct to protect. Before he could respond, Calder stepped forward with a booming laugh, acting as if he hadn't noticed their whispered exchange. "Well, son, she ain't too hard on the eyes after all, is she?" he said loudly, forcing humor into the moment. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Something was terribly wrong. Naelli, as she later whispered her name, kept her eyes lowered, shoulders tight as if bracing for a blow. It wasn't shyness. He could sense fear beneath the calm. The kind of fear people carry when trapped. When the ceremony ended, Calder insisted on speaking privately with Ethan, but the cowboy brushed past him and moved to walk beside the woman who had just become his wife. She looked surprised by the gesture, as if she expected to be ignored, or worse. Outside the barn, the sun was setting in streaks of red and gold. Ethan offered her his arm gently. She hesitated but took it. Her touch was light, cautious, ready to pull away at any moment. "I don't know what's going on," Ethan said quietly, "but I'm not a man who likes being lied to." Her eyes lifted to his, dark and steady. "Then you're already in danger." The words chilled him more than any threat he'd ever faced. She wasn't dramatic, she wasn't pleading, she was simply telling the truth. Before Ethan could ask more, Calder stormed out, pretending at fatherly warmth, but failing miserably. "Congratulations. We'll ride to the ranch tomorrow. Tonight she stays under my roof." Naelli flinched, and Ethan felt it. "No," Ethan said calmly but firmly. "She's my wife. She goes with me." Calder's eyes hardened for the briefest moment before his grin snapped back into place. Of course. Just tradition, you know." But Ethan knew this wasn't about tradition, it was about control. As they rode away together on Ethan's horse, Naelli sat behind him, silent for several minutes. Then she spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "He didn't tell you who I really am." Ethan kept his hands steady on the reins. "Then tell me." She hesitated, then said 7 words that changed everything. "My land is the reason for this." And suddenly, Calder's scheme began to make sense. The lies, the rush, the secrecy. Ethan didn't know the whole truth yet, but one thing was clear. He hadn't married a burden. He had married a storm, one he intended to stand beside no matter what followed. Ethan didn't press her that night, even though Naelli's confession had turned everything he knew upside down. They made camp beneath an open sky, the fire crackling softly while she sat across from him, fingers tracing invisible shapes in the dirt. Her voice, when she finally spoke again, was steadier than he expected. She told him her mother had been Apache, strong, respected, keeper of a valley rich with water and grazing land. When her mother died, Naelli inherited the land according to Apache custom, though she had been too young to understand the weight of it. Calder understood it well. The land was untouched, fertile, worth more than most ranches in 3 counties combined, and he, as Naelli's adoptive father, believed he had a rightful claim, if only he could bind her legally through marriage. Not a real marriage, just a transaction, a signature, a way to slip his hand into the property and squeeze it dry. Naelli looked at Ethan through the firelight, her eyes fierce but tired. He wanted someone obedient, someone desperate. He didn't expect you to question anything. Ethan let her words settle between them. He was furious at Calder's lies, at his manipulation, at the way he treated Naelli like livestock to be traded. But more than anger, he felt something deeper rising in him, a need to protect her, not because she was helpless, but because she had carried this weight alone for far too long. "I won't let him near you again," Ethan said quietly. Naelli studied him for a long moment. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," he replied, "but I made a vow, not the one he forced, the one I make right now. You're not alone anymore." Her lips parted slightly, surprised, but a small, fragile warmth appeared in her eyes. The next morning the peace shattered. Before the sun had fully risen, the thunder of horses came down the ridge. Calder's men, 6 of them, riding hard, dust trailing behind like smoke. Calder rode at the front, his face twisted with triumph. Ethan moved immediately, stepping in front of Naelli as she rose, her hand gripping the knife she kept hidden in her boot. "There she is," Calder barked. "You think you can steal from me, girl? Think you can run?" Naelli didn't flinch. "You stole from me first." Calder ignored her, pointing at Ethan. "And you? I gave you a generous deal, Ward, and you repay me with betrayal. Hand her over." "She's not cattle," Ethan said, voice steady as steel. "And I'm not giving her to you." Calder's grin turned poisonous. "You think you can stop me?" Ethan didn't reach for his gun, but his hand hovered close. Naelli stepped beside him, shoulders squared, ready to fight if she had to. Calder's men began to dismount, hands drifting toward their holsters. And then the wind shifted. A low whistle carried across the valley, one, then another. Ethan froze. Naelli's expression changed, tension melting into recognition. Shapes emerged from the ridge across the camp. Silent riders, paint on their faces, bows, rifles, and fierce eyes watching every movement below. The Apache tribe. Naelli stepped forward, her presence transforming, no longer wary, no longer shrinking from danger. She moved with quiet authority. Several Apache riders touched their fists to their hearts in respect. Ethan realized then, she wasn't just someone with Apache blood, she was someone valued, someone they would fight for. The chief, a tall man with gray in his hair, addressed Calder in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. "The land belongs to her mother's bloodline. You will not take what is not yours." Calder spat on the ground. "She's my daughter." "No," the chief replied. "You took her. You never earned her." Ethan watched Calder's face crumble into rage. His men shifted nervously as more Apache warriors appeared behind them, surrounding the clearing entirely. There was no way out. Calder knew it. "This isn't finished," Calder growled, but his voice cracked under the weight of defeat. "You'll regret crossing me." Ethan finally stepped forward, his voice calm but unbreakable. "No, you regret underestimating her." Calder glared at Naelli one last time, eyes filled with hatred, then jerked his reins and turned his horse. His men followed, shaken, vanishing into the rising sun like a bad dream chased off by daylight. When they were gone, the valley exhaled. Naelli stood still for a moment, as if taking in the sheer reality of her freedom. Then she turned to the chief, who placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Words passed between them in soft Apache tones. Words of welcome, of pride, of release. When the tribe rode on, giving her their blessing to choose her own life, Naelli remained beside Ethan. The morning felt different now, lighter, open, filled with possibilities that had been denied to her for years. Ethan waited, unsure if she would stay or walk away to reclaim her mother's land. He wouldn't stop her either way. It was her choice now. At last. Naelli stepped closer, the tension that had always wrapped around her finally loosening. "You stood with me when you didn't have to." "I'd do it again," Ethan said. She looked up at him, eyes reflecting the golden sunrise. "Then I choose to ride with you, not because I must, because I want to." Ethan felt something shift, like the snap of a rope that had been binding him for years. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Together, they mounted his horse, the land stretching wide and open before them. Behind them lay Calder's greed and lies. Ahead lay a future free and unclaimed, shaped by their own courage, loyalty, and the unexpected bond they had forged. They rode on, not as a forced husband and hidden daughter, but as two souls choosing each other, choosing freedom, choosing love.